know it's our job to help this guy and everything, but I think this guy's a lost cause. He's obviously made up his mind. Why don't we just cut our losses and get out of here?
As you can see, I'm a bit of a metalhead. Tiny bit. Tiny, eensy beensy bit. Tiny bit. Where's my gamer juice? Screw it. This'll work. I got hair in my mouth. I gotta go outside more. All of this setup for a very stupid bit. That's it for today's episode of Kiserino Touches Grass. Back to you in the studio. This is the stupidest bit I've ever done, dude. Like I said in my Hanabi video, I enjoy music that's experimental by nature. Songs that look at what's conventionally good and blatantly ignore it. Conventional songs done in unconventional means, if you will. Sorry, my slime core fans. Risk is an album that looks at the widely successful golden child of Megadeth and spits at it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand Risk, you've got to understand what led up to Risk and why it wasn't received well by the fans. The year is 1990. Megadeth released what is considered to be their best album ever, maybe even one of the best metal albums ever produced, Rust in Peace. In my personal grading scale that's totally not biased and arbitrary, it takes the equivalent of a 9.9. The pacing, the technical complexity, every song actually being good, and well-balanced mixing. Rust in Peace narrowly misses a perfect score due to its lack of availability for new listeners. 2 years later, in 1992, Megadeth released one of their top-selling albums, Countdown to Extinction. Countdown to Extinction is their best-selling album to date at double platinum or over 2 million copies sold. This album, according to Mustaine, was on track to the top of the Billboard charts, but it was cut short due to the tour ending early. You see, at this point, Mustaine was a recovering alcoholic and heroin addict. The constant stress he was under was pushing him closer and closer to relapsing. Mustaine's wife practically forced him off the stage and forced him to call off the rest of the tour. This devastated Mustaine, but he knew he had to do it, and I agree with this. Drugs are bad, unless you play jazz fusion, to which the children may have a little bit of heroin. But because Mustaine wasn't playing jazz fusion to the level of Peace Sells, I don't think he needed any heroin. From this point till Risk, Mustaine was determined to get a #1 spot, and his music reflected that. Euthanasia in particular. You can hear more radio-friendly tunes with comparatively less harsh and poppy tones. As well, the original BPM for the album was 120, but later sped up in the 2004 remasters. So, me from another point in time will play for you all of the openers to the studio albums leading up to Risk, excluding Last Rites Love to Death. That one gives me a little bit of trouble. And, listen, I make a fool of myself way too much to begin with. I'm not gonna embarrass myself by playing something very bad. Now, cue me playing stuff very bad. Okay, got all that? Here's the opener to Risk. A little about myself. I am a sucker for album pacing. Back in the day before the towers fell, CDs, vinyls, 8-tracks, and cassette tapes, they didn't have a shuffle button. Duh. So, most normal people would listen to the album all the way through, from start to finish. So, most artists would write their albums to be listened to, start to finish. One of the greatest examples of this is Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. A key part of album pacing is the opener. It gets the hooker. It gets the hooker. A key part of album pacing is the opener. It gets the listener hook, line, and sinker and sets the precedent for what the album's going to be like. Holy Wars, The Punishment Due is the best example for this. Insomnia, while not technically difficult or bad, it sets the precedent for listeners who've been listening to heavy hitters like Chosen Ones, Bad Omen, Hook in Mouth, Symphony of Destruction, hell, even Victory. That this isn't going to be an album like Peace Sells or Rust in Peace. People didn't like this album upon its release. Not because it's bad, but because it's not Megadeth. Or rather, not the Megadeth the fans were used to. None of these are bad songs, but compare The Doctor's Calling. To Rattlehead. Seven. To The Conjuring. Wanderlust. To Set the World Afire. And Crush 'Em. To Tornado of Souls. Whether it's Mustaine taking a risk and selling out, or continually slowing things down just to appease the other half of the group, Risk isn't trying to be the albums before it. You can tell in my comparisons the clear victor on good thrash songs. Thing is, Risk isn't trying to be Killing Is My Business or So Far So Good So What. Mustaine even said that if released under a different name, the album would have sold well. It's because fans were looking for Megadeth and didn't find it. You can tell that it performed terribly because the next album, World Needs a Hero, was the return to form thrash slop that Megadeth needed. But even after the release of Risk and the departure of Marty Friedman to Japan, the following albums, you can see the effect that Risk had on Megadeth. Specifically talking about songs like The Blackest Crow, Promises, Conquer or Die, hell, even Super Collider, which is a tough song to listen to. Risk embodies the progression of making music. You can only make the same song work maybe once, if you're lucky, twice. And you could either stay in the past, making the same music over and over again, hoping that maybe one day somebody might get nostalgic, or you can take a risk and make something interesting. See what I did there? I am the funniest man alive.
I think this guy's a lost cause.